gagnez en plus du forum, c'est de vous inspirer de l'expérience rwandaise. Moi, je pense en plus des échanges des biens, nous pouvons faire des échanges des expériences. Et ce que nous sommes en train de faire ici au Rwanda, dans ce pays avancé en matière du climat des affaires. Voilà, si je puis dire, ce que nous sommes en train de faire. Et nous sommes dans le cadre d'un grand projet du président de la République, l'autosuffisance alimentaire, en train de mettre au point des unités pour pouvoir transformer les marchandises, les matières premières, d'abord pour la consommation interne et pour l'exportation. Là également, nous sommes confrontés au problème de normes, parce que vous pouvez exporter, mais il faudrait que vous ayez des normes qui conviennent à ce que les autres peuvent accepter. Je suis heureux de voir le Centre de commerce international est disposé à nous accompagner dans ce domaine, parce que nous sommes aujourd'hui éligibles à l'emploi. Mais en dépit de cela, nous attirons très peu de bénéfices parce que nous sommes confrontés au problème des barrières non tarifaires, notamment celui de l'eau. Donc voilà comment nous avons ce problème: améliorer les infrastructures, diminuer le coût de production, améliorer le climat des affaires pour que nous puissions intensifier les affaires, parce qu'à l'UMOA, dans notre zone sous-régionale, nous avons une monnaie commune, une langue commune, mais avec cela, nous rendons compte que nous avons très peu d'échanges. Donc il faudrait qu'il y ait une complémentarité, peut-être avec les États, pour qu'avec des avantages comparatifs, nous puissions privilégier, spécialiser les productions d'une zone à l'autre. Voilà ce que je peux vous dire à l'entame du sujet.
Minister, thank you so much for that perspective. You're highlighting the opportunities, but also the difficulties, challenges, and obstacles that need to be addressed in order to really harness this opportunity. Ambassador Yu, I'd like to turn to you. China finds itself very much at the heart of the South-South debate, and the South-South trade debate. How important is the relationship with Africa and the trade relationship with Africa from a Chinese perspective, and how is this relationship evolving? Because China's relationship with Africa is often described in very simplistic terms as revolving purely around natural resources and raw materials. But of course, there's increasing depth in that relationship. It'd be great to get your perspective on how this is evolving and how African countries can really leverage and harness the opportunity of South-South trade.
Thank you very much. And it's really a privilege for me to be the panelist for this session. First of all, I thank ITC for the invitation, and I thank the government of Rwanda for the hospitalities. South-South trade is a very important part of international trade. When the financial crisis hit the northern economies more directly, the South-South trade should play a more important role in the promotion of the South-South trade, in the recovery of the world economy. China-Africa bilateral trade is a showcase of the South-South trade. Over the past years, the bilateral trade between China and Africa has been expanded constantly. China became the #1 trade partner of this continent since 2009, when the bilateral trade reached $90 billion. Ever since that, the trade has achieved more robust growth. You see, up to 2013, the bilateral trade reached $212 billion, which was 28 annual growth on average since 2009. You see, in the China's global economy, if we look at the bilateral trade between China and Africa in the China's global trade, this piece of cake has become bigger. You see, in 2009, this piece of cake counted for 4% of China's global trade. When we look at this piece of cake in 2013, it was 5%. China's exports to Africa remain stable as 4%, while the African exports to China reached 6% in the China's total imports from the worldwide. We can also look at this bilateral trade in Africa's, this piece of cake in Africa trade, 18%. That by Africa's imports from China increased from 4% to 14%. Currently, when we read the report by the WTO released last year, China has become the major trading partner of 120 economies in the world. You see, among which 31 are from Africa. In spite of the constant rapid progress in the bilateral trade, we should not stop here. We should take more measures to, both in traditional way and in innovative way. When I say in the traditional way, I mean, you see, we need to further expand the scale of the trade, the bilateral trade. When I say innovative way, I mean we need to upgrade the quality of the bilateral structure. We need to combine the investment and the trade more directly and more closely. You see, there's a lot of potential in the trade between China and Africa. The Chinese government attaches great importance to the development of the bilateral trade between China and Africa, as well as the other southern countries. So personally, I'm very optimistic about the future.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Mula, I'd like to turn to you in the Ethiopian perspective, because Ethiopia, in many ways, is a fantastic example of South-South trade in action, and it's one of the few economies in sub-Saharan Africa today that is making meaningful progress on things like manufacturing and getting, and sort of leveraging some of these international trends. And China, in particular, is playing an important role in sort of driving economic development and growth in Ethiopia. I'd like to get your thoughts on South-South opportunity, but also the role that your agency has played in promoting some of these trends that we're seeing on the ground today. I think the microphone is in the middle.
Thank you. I would like to thank ITC and also the government of Rwanda and all the sponsors who make this great conference to happen in Africa. Thank you very much indeed. I'm also honored and privileged to be here to share our experience of Ethiopia in the capacity of the Honorary President of Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce and also Vice President of Commerce Business Council. As he mentioned, the trade facilitation units like institutions like Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce or other unions and associations can play a great role to facilitate trade and use opportunity of South-South cooperation. Like if we take the experience of Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce, as Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce is one of the legal institutions which is established by proclamation by law to represent the Ethiopian private sector legally. But it doesn't mean it is the only trade facilitation institute. We have government institutes, we have consultants, we have others also who can do this. But the Ethiopian Chamber or other chambers which are regional also do trade facilitation. For example, we arrange B2B, a business-to-business meeting. We lead delegation to other countries. We also host delegation to our country so that we share experience and learn from others. And also we give proper information so that our members know what's going on. We are not only giving this information to members only, but also to any business people, business community, so that the people will learn and prepare themselves to take this opportunity and exploit the opportunity of South-South cooperation. I can say we are not benefiting much from this cooperation, but recently we have changed our way, because sometimes we think things do as usual, things can go as usual. But when things change, we have to change. When the music is changing, like yesterday, we have been seeing the cultural show. When the music is changing, the dance was changing. When the world is changing, we have to change. Initially, we were only trying to do things by ourselves, as Ethiopians, to do everything by ourselves. No chain of, no value chain, locally or internationally, but also trying to do everything by ourselves as Ethiopians. But what happened? When the opening up came, because we are a closed society, socialist society, the new market economy was introduced currently, and we were doing business as usual, but it didn't go. Later on, when we started opening up and inviting others, like from China, from India, from Turkey, we started inviting others who can manufacture in the level of the quality, in the level of standard required. Then we are now, like yesterday, Ellen was explaining about the one Chinese shoe factory, which is 100% export to USA, to high-end market. And also I can mention one of the Turkish companies, which is Ayka Addis, which is only employing 8,500 workers for one line only. 90% is automated, but only last touch is by manual, and it requires human resource, and others are capital intensive, but they are also 100% exporting to high-end market in Europe and America. That means made in Africa, made in Ethiopia, can be exported to any member of South-South cooperation. When we cooperate, when we can work together, either invite those who can work in higher standard as per requirement, also make a joint venture with international manufacturers who have high standard, or learn from them. What we have done is using two of them. Like for example, if we take now Heineken, Diageo, and all other known beverage companies are in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, they are investing largely. But local companies, individuals, local indigenous people have come as a share company, and they are also producing the highest quality beer which can be exported, which can be locally consumed. Therefore, instead of simply seeing and waiting and doing things as usual, we have to have a mind shift and to change our approach, how to tap the opportunity of South-South cooperation. When I say this, it doesn't mean that we have no challenge. We have many challenges, like all of them mentioned. Ethiopian companies, like for example, women are involved almost 90-95% in informal sector. This informal sector is addressing many of the social needs, many of the people's needs, but we don't have such high-level products for export, leave alone for export, and perhaps it may not be a standard for local consumption. But we are working towards making this informal formal, so that we can tap the opportunity of women entrepreneurs, even informals and SMEs, to be incorporated to the export market. That's why I remember Mauritius was tapping this opportunity of AGOA long ago, using the informals, using the SMEs, so that their products, their service can help the export market of South-South cooperation or any part of the world. Not only that, our SMEs our companies have big challenges. Like if I simply mention the research done by World Bank, we have hierarchically, the World Bank has mentioned the highest constraint is access to finance. Second is access to land, and it says electricity. Of course, electricity cost in Ethiopia is the cheapest in the world, but it doesn't mean it's enough for all. We are working on that. We are working on it to have a great supply, because we see our comparative advantage. We are investing in the Nile Dam, the Renaissance Dam, and again we are also working on other electricity production, and also tax administration, tax rates, and customs regulation and logistics, which was very bureaucratic and heartbreaking. But now, after we have this public-private dialogue with the government, it's improving. I'll come to it when I discuss about the solution. And also, the informal sector practices I am mentioning. Corruption is mentioned on the 8th, 9th, 10th level, but Ethiopia is considered to be a corruption-free country, but it doesn't mean it's 100% free. In our culture, it's not allowed even to touch somebody's property which it doesn't belong to you, in any form, whether you are a prime minister, a minister, or what have you, as our culture. But we want it to be as pure as our culture. We are working on it to make it zero tolerance. And transportation is also our challenge. Inadequate educated work, like we don't have such talented experience to the world market or to the international market. Can I go to the solution or I discuss later? What we have done to make the remedy?
We'll get back to the solution. I just want to make sure that we get through the
okay, thank you very much.
But we'll get back to that for sure. Thank you so much. The message over to you. Now, India, like China, has been a driving force behind. At what point do we start to also bring the SMB beyond SMB sector, which is obviously what we're here to discuss? Because India is a very, very important component of this. It'd be great to get your perspective, where this relationship is going, where the opportunities are, how we can harness.
Thank you. At the outset, I thank ITC and also the government of Rwanda for bringing me here and giving me the privilege to sit on this dais to talk to all of you. This is my first visit to Africa, and I must admit it has been a very, very pleasant visit. Rwanda is an excellent place. I really liked it, and the infrastructure is superb. I must admit in confidence, please don't take it out of the room, that in most of the cases it's better than what we have in India. So let's admit that for a fact. Now, leaving that part aside, I was just, over the last 2 days or 3 days that we have been here, we have had a lot of discussions and conferences which are going on, and also side discussions on the sidelines, which are very common in such conferences. Now, we have had a very interesting story of Chinese shoe factory in Ethiopia. We have an interesting story of other such ventures coming up in various parts of the continent. From my desk back in Mumbai, I today go on receiving a lot of applications from eager Indian entrepreneurs to set up industrial units in various parts of Africa. The enthusiasm till now, admittedly, is mostly in Ethiopia, but there are other countries also which have started attracting interest of Indian investors. So that is a very important thing which has to be highlighted. As you had mentioned, Airtel is already here in a very big way. Tatas have been here for a very, very long time. Indo-African trade or Indo-African cultural exchange somehow had been always in the forefront ever since the days when the African freedom struggle, etc., etc. Now I'm not going into that. But what is important to note here, I find, is that African trade, international trade of Africa is definitely growing. When I go through the figures, I find not only that it has been on a rising trend in the last, the figures I had were for the last 5 years. I have seen a continuous rise except in 2013 when there was a dip from 603 in the previous year, $1 billion, to 582 or something like that. Now that is well explained perhaps by the global recession. So that can be pardoned, and otherwise Africa had been growing its exports. Imports obviously have also been growing, but that is the nature in which a globalized economy essentially conducts its trade, manufacturing, etc. So there is nothing astonishing that imports are also growing, but exports are growing, that is the important point. Except for 2013, Africa aggregatively as a whole has had a positive trade balance. Now that is another very important point which has to be noted. I'm talking in terms of the macro picture. Now, Africa has a huge amount of advantage and obviously certain disadvantages, because historically Africa has started late in the full process of economic development, industrialization, as well as international trade. So, but given the fact that you have a large amount of mineral resources here, given the fact that you have a large coastline around, given the fact that in Egypt and South Africa you have two of the relatively larger international container ports, there is a whole lot of promise which is coming up. Yesterday we heard about the vision of next 50 years, 2063, to convert the African economy. or whatever has been done in the last 50 years has been more in the nature of liberation struggle. Next 50 years it would be in the nature of economic liberalization. That is what was told from the rostrum here, and which was essentially very important. Now, if you take the aggregate picture, the scope or the opportunities are really immense, because today Africa controls only 3% of the global trade. Intra-African trade also is only 11% of the total African trade. So that means if you go by sheer numbers, there is huge amount of opportunity obviously lying everywhere. India has been an important partner in this trade. Indian exports have grown. South-South cooperation has been very, very important. South-South cooperation, which is today about 33% of world trade, is expected to grow up to 66%, that is two-thirds, by the year 2030. Now, South-South cooperation is where China, India, Africa, everything fits in. And so there is, by the sheer number, by the sheer dynamic forces, which the world economy is unleashing in favor of South-South trade and South-South cooperation, obviously Africa will have a large role to play in the days to come, given the huge amount of mineral resources, the virgin market, and also the very pleasant and enterprising initiative which appear to have been taken by in nature of the common market or opening up the markets for more integrated marketing structure. Now, having said that, I would also like to highlight that not only trade and commerce, India has a lot of important things which can be shared with Africa. In the sense, the first important thing is that the commonality of development. We also started about 50 years back in the nature in economic development, and the development we have pursued is primarily in the nature of privatization of economic activities. There have been a good and robust public sector, there is no denying that, but the private sector has developed, and today most of the economic activities which you hear in India, barring the few large public sector, is primarily a private sector story. Whether you look at the IT sector of India, whether you look at the Tatas, whether you look at the Airtel or whatever, you look at various things, it's all private initiative which is driven. Africa is also pursuing essentially a private sector-led development model. So that would essentially be one of the similarities which is important for one to understand and appreciate. The second important thing, which is to be noted, is that we have absolutely in India, we do not have a unitary nature of political rule. It's a federal structure of rule, where various states have their own compulsions, their own economic imperatives, plus a voice in determining what happens to the aggregate national economic strength. Here we heard of the 54 nations trying to vie together and create one large African common market. So it has some resemblance to the federal structure which we are talking about. So perhaps there is something to be learned from there, how we come out of it in Bangalore. For instance, right now there is a debate going on in India or implementation of GST, Goods and Services Tax, which is whereby we go to the next stage of unifying the Indian economic market. So here also in Africa, when we are talking of economic integration, we are essentially talking of economic integration by unifying the taxes and duties, and so that free movement of goods are happening. So there is another point where we can also give and learn how we go forward. Now the third important, yeah.
I'll ask for this to be the last point, just for the...
Oh, sorry. I am running out of time. Sorry. Okay. Now, okay. The last point, of course, I hope we can discuss further. The last point which I would like to mention is that trade, fine, economic activities, fine. Finally, we have to talk in terms of sustainable economic development and sustainable economic growth. It's not a question of getting investment from China today, India tomorrow, and Brazil the third day, and also exporting manganese ore today or maybe mineral oils tomorrow. Okay. Essentially, we have to talk in terms of moving up the value chain. Essentially, we have to talk in terms of sustainable economic development. Now, sustainable economic development is something on the private sector model is what India has pursued. The development experience of India is something which has to be shared, because primarily we have to, when we talk of African SMEs, we have to talk in terms of SME growth not as an independent growth which can just spur exports. It does not just happen that way, because the products which we manufacture in this world today are very, very unified. So you have to look at quality, you have to look at product enhancement, quality enhancement, you have to look at technological upgradation, you have to look at learning, doing things yourself within Africa. Let me tell you, India is still a very diversified economy. Lot of other economies which started economic development at the same time in India has not become diversified. And that diversification has come about just because we not only concentrated on creating industrial units, both in the SMEs as well as on the large scale, but we also decided to learn the technique of engineering consultancy. We decided to learn the technique of financial innovation, and we decided to train up our people, our own people, to go for economic development. And also India today is not extremely reliant. When we started, we had a lot of foreign technology know-how, we set up industrial units. Today that is becoming less and less. In Africa, what India can give is perhaps share the development knowledge so that Africa can have that buoyancy through the economic development pursued along with human development, through technical knowledge, implantation, which can happen with the African youth, so that we can develop a sustainable economic model in Africa. Thank you.
It's a good note to end on, because the issue of shared experiences is, of course, an important component of South-South cooperation and South-South trade. And this is where this represents an additional opportunity. Not note, I'd like to turn to you, Ambassador Mugeni. On the Kenyan perspective, Kenya is on the other side of this equation. Vis-a-vis Africa, one of the more exciting economies. It's been one of the economies that's been at the heart of the African growth story. How important is South-South trade today in the Kenyan context? How important is it going to be going forward?
Thank you very much. Before I make my remarks, I would like to thank the Rwandan government for inviting us all in this forum, but also to congratulate the Rwanda for being the first African country to hold this important event. I'd like also to extend the apologies of my Minister for East African Affairs, Trade and Tourism, Mrs. Phyllis Ndia, whom I'm representing today. She should have loved to be here, but she was held up at home commitments. Now, I think listening to members of the panelists, we all agree there's a consensus about the importance of South-South trade. Now, in the Kenyan perspective, we look at, the most important place to begin is the historic perspective. Most of African economies, were, structured to supply raw material products to the northern side of the world. But as we move along, we started recognizing that there is need to move away from just purely exporting raw materials, and African intertrade as a very key priority in terms of economic and trade diplomacy, because we do recognize that the only way that we can enhance our economies, reduce poverty and create employment is actually to trade within ourselves. Now, as an economy which has got some form of quite, in African context, manufacturing capabilities, we have been working on ensuring that we put in more efforts, and we put also in more, create a much more conducive environment to increase our productivity and our competitivity within our own communities. The most important thing in the Kenyan perspective in this sense is that we say we need to begin by trading among ourselves. I think that's one of the most important things before we start looking at going across either as a continent, trading with Asia or South America, or even the America and Europe. And this is driven primarily by the fact that we think the opportunities lie more in inter-African trade that we have just had, rather than going much outside a sphere of economic activity. Therefore, we hold things like our partnership, our participants in the, for example, Eastern Community and the Commercial region. There has been a lot of accelerated activity in the past 2 years because we realized that that's where we want to focus in terms of expanding our trade with our neighbors. And I think yesterday you heard President Kagame talk about the Northern Africa, the Northern projects initiatives where we are accelerating the trade among ourselves. We are removing any trade barriers. We are ensuring that the environment of trade between our countries is conducive for our people, and I think that's where we're going. The other important thing that we need to note, I mean, I've had experiences from India and from China. I was listening very carefully, and also from the minister, is that we have to create, even in our own economies, conducive environment. Now, one of the most important things that we have had in the house was about, cost of production was very high. We've had a lot of problems in the infrastructure. Some of the constraints was also the development of the trade policies that favor our industry to be more competitive. Now in Kenya, we have focused now in the past couple of years, I think I'd say about 10 years, on a lot of investment in infrastructure because we need to lower the cost of production. We also investing heavily in energy. That also goes to add on our companies being more competitive, and that's where we will be going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And just to, before I open up the floor and get some comments and get some questions, I would like to go back to you, because I did promise that we will get back to this. And as the only woman on the panel, I feel justified in perhaps giving you an extra 2 minutes to address some of the solutions before we then take some comments and questions from the floor as well.
Okay, thank you very much. As I tried the problems, we try to address through our own the Chamber of Commerce and trying to have a dialogue with the government, be it corruption, be it customs logistics, or what have you. And then we see now a progress where the government is ready to solve the rules and regulations, policies. For example, if I mention one, the government has set institutions to support the leather sector, the textile sector. Previously was simply exporting raw leather, but now, as a policy, it was stopped to export raw leather. But it didn't left like that. There is an institution which will support the companies to learn, to have a training, how to make a shoe, how to make leather products. Therefore, this is one step to not only to stop doing, but also helping the companies to promote, to grow and do the export. And the other issues are technical supports, where we give not only change of policy, and the other is on the PPD side, to create enabling environment where most of the world researchers say they measure, especially World Bank measures mostly, ease of doing business. If business doing is not easy for locals or foreign investors, nothing can be done. Therefore, we have worked on that also to improve the ease of doing problems, but it doesn't mean that everything is now green carpet, but we have a lot to work. After the government accepts all of our proposals, the implementation side is still, we are working to finish some which are not implemented and formed a committee to push the implementation side. The other issue he mentioned as to what we have as a challenge is also the competitiveness problem, like the economies of scale, where others produce 1 billion in 1 hour, we cannot produce that, we might bring 100,000. In that case, even though to export to other market, we cannot be competitive in our own local market. Therefore, we are focusing on share companies which can bring big technology, big capacity, so that we can participate in South-South cooperation and also export to others. As Africans, we have a lot to source from each other. The infrastructure issue is one of the problems again. And we are pushing to AU through COMISA, Business Council, where we have to be connected through infrastructure, to enable a source from each other also. As always I mentioned from Gabon export, though of course China is in the South-South trade, but you can see how it is far. China imports timber from Gabon, but we import furnitures. Imagine how it is far away, and we have to work on it. We have started working on it, this regional trade integration through COMISA Business Council, And also as Ethiopian Chamber, we are working on promoting businesses, understanding the secrets, understanding the requirement. The other serious issue that we have to tackle is, like we have EVA to export to European Union, AGOA, Batavi, but it seems very free, but it's not free. Like it says quota free, but non-tariff barriers are there. Sometimes they might say this is not our culture. In that case, Africa or South Africa need our own standard. We can say we are not going to import any tomato which don't have 30 months of sunshine. In this case, nobody will export to Africa, isn't it? We can have our standard and also negotiate, as we discussed yesterday. We are working on it also, where we can exploit the opportunity well, especially dialogue not only with the government, local government, with the AU itself, to focus on economic development, not only politics, is one of the biggest issues that we are going to take forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Because of our time constraints, I'm going to ask each of the remaining panelists to try and restrict your comments, your remarks to 2 minutes, if at all possible, because otherwise we are running severely over time. Debatas, over to you really quickly. Why Ethiopia? Why not the rest of Africa? To me, it seems India is quite excited about many places in Africa.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I would perhaps require more than 2 minutes at the outset.
I suspect
there are very important points which were raised here. I feel it is necessary to answer them. And until now, the answer them, we are perhaps not doing proper service. So I would request you to kindly, if necessary, grant me more than 2 minutes.
Well, 3 minutes too.
Mr. Hanumant Reddy is my friend, whom I met last couple of days back in Rwanda. And I got introduced to him here. And he's an Indian industrialist who has come here and set up. That goes for Madam there. That there is an Indian industrialist, young chap, who has come here and invested. So it's not that other countries are not getting investment in Africa, but till now the dominant trend has been more in Ethiopia. Primarily, I believe, because Ethiopia perhaps has marketed itself from a longer period of time in a better way. And it's not that the others have not marketed, but others have come to the investors' radar later than Ethiopia has come. And once they all come up to the investors' radar and the countries are more known. For instance, you have brought me here, now I'll go back and speak good things about your country, and then I'm sure that 1 or 2 investments here, they will start trickling in, and experience of those will give you more investments. The point which I was raising essentially is a point of cooperation for success of South-South trade or success of Indo-African trade or whatever, means African trade generally. And in that connection I was telling that it is necessary to build up certain capabilities which essentially help sustainable development of the nature of which you are talking about. In the sense that it should be more of company-company cooperation, or where African companies are also involved as an active partner. It's not that it becomes an Indian company or a Chinese company. It's a very, very important and relevant point. And that is why we are saying that let us from this conference take back scope that, see, it is necessary to develop a lot of capabilities around. Like as I was telling you, like India started at the same time as a lot of other countries started. India has a much more diversified economy than others have. And today India's knowledge for importing technical know-how and all are less, primarily because India is concentrated to develop the knowledge for detailed engineering, drawing, other technical consultancy and all, which are very tough tasks. Coming to your IPO question, sir, the IPO just cannot happen because primarily the capital market in Africa, maybe except South Africa, is not very well developed as far as we understand. Please pardon me if I am wrong. And to go for an IPO, can that be like in India, there's an organization called SIDBI, Small Industries Development Bank of India. That's company has created a credit guarantee fund for small scale industries. That means SMEs or small businesses which cannot bring collaterals to the table while availing credit can take a guarantee from that credit guarantee trust fund, and that has enabled them to get more credit. Now that is an innovation which is done, and we believe, 1 minute sir, we believe that at the local level there should be more cooperation, and we look forward to a more healthy trade. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much. The 1 minute mark, shades of Erdogan there. Yes, Minister, please.
Merci encore. Je crois que la réaction de la salle, vous tenez un groupe déjà qui est là en Afrique pour se communiquer. Donc la réaction de la salle et de différentes interventions prouve qu'il faut d'abord au niveau africain que nous trouvions des solutions pour accroître les échanges entre africains. Et pour ce faire, le problème qui a été posé, c'est le problème de compétitivité. Aujourd'hui au Niger, par exemple, il est beaucoup plus opportun pour nous d'importer le riz que de le produire, ce qui n'est pas normal. Le riz produit n'est pas compétitif. Alors que les importés des Thaïlande, d'Inde, où ils passent plus de 10 000 km ou 7 000 km au Niger, mais il revient beaucoup moins cher au Niger que le riz que nous produisons localement. Un problème. La solution, c'est qu'il nous faut nécessairement des gros ensembles. Il faut que la solution se trouve au niveau sous-régional, régional. Que nous puissions investir en nous spécialisant. Par exemple, pour l'énergie, le Niger est producteur d'uranium. Aujourd'hui en Afrique, on n'a pas les moyens de produire l'électricité. Je crois que des grands pays comme l'Afrique du Sud, le Nigeria, ou au niveau des barrages, le Congo, peuvent produire l'électricité pour l'ensemble du continent ou pour une grande région de notre continent. On ne le fait pas. Avec la proposition du Sud-Sud, nos partenaires indiens et chinois ont parlé de le problème auquel nous sommes confrontés, qui a été soulevé à juste titre par Madame de la Tanzanie, c'est qu'on se rend compte que les Chinois et les Indiens sont en train de commettre la même erreur que nos partenaires du Nord. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a peu de transfert de compétences. Nos partenaires et les partenaires locaux du Niger, par exemple, se plaignent que quand les Chinois viennent, ils viennent avec la main-d'œuvre. Ils n'utilisent très peu de main-d'œuvre locale. Cela n'est pas admissible. Donc il faudrait qu'une coopération soit bonne, il faut qu'elle soit équilibrée. Il faudrait que nous ne soyons pas percepteurs comme l'on dit dans la salle, mais que nous soyons également créateurs, qu'on puisse former les compétences. Je crois que c'est à ce prix qu'on doit le faire, et à notre niveau, améliorer la gouvernance et peut-être avoir une libéralisation contrôlée. On ne peut pas, aujourd'hui par exemple le riz, les commerçants africains qui ont introduit les Chinois, les Indiens et les Vietnamiens en Afrique, ils sont remplacés, les Chinois viennent s'installer dans les frontières et dans les comptoirs. Donc, ils évacuent, ils éjectent les commerçants de nos propres pays. Et je crois qu'en le faisant, ça crée la frustration. Donc, une situation, qu'elle soit durable, il faut qu'elle soit équilibrée. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister. Any other comments, any other remarks? Because they want to know the direct questions. Yes. Ambassador,
I think I'd like to make just a comment regarding the lady from Tanzania. She asked about the South-South cooperation. And from hearing what the minister says, the critical thing for us in Africa is to deepen the integration. We have several regional trading bodies, about 9 of them in Africa. We could ECOWAS. We've heard from West Africa, COMESA, SADC, East African Community. There is an important message here that we need to ensure that we integrate more. We need to ensure that we don't pay just lip service in terms of we're going to trade amongst ourselves. And I think if we deepen our integration and work in partnership along Africa ourselves, then that gives us an opportunity to be able to have a stronger voice when you're talking about partnership with other regions. That's what I want.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, please.
There are 3 points that I would like to mention. First, to echo what Ambassador just mentioned about the regional integration. The regional integration is not only important from the perspective of enhancing trade within the region, but also important from the perspective of having Africa as a region which is attractive enough for the foreign investors to be able to come and invest in the region. So that's quite important, and this is where Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, these big economies that come into picture. And this is something that you asked me first round, but I couldn't respond because of lack of time. Second issue is the need to promote private sector to private sector cooperation. G2G cooperation is something that we've had enough. And in order to promote private sector cooperation, what we need to do is to create an enabling environment. When I talk about enabling environment, it includes improved business climate as well as investment in certain public goods. These public goods are infrastructure, trade facilitation, human capital and technology. And the third point that I would like to mention is how to enhance deeper integration with other countries, other South-South economies. And this can be done not only through preferential market access as discussed by Chinese ambassador, but also investment cooperation, agreement on the investment cooperation so that public investment such as the nature that was highlighted this morning, the airport road from airport to the hotel to the city, as well as private investment that could be brought in. And at the last point that Devasis mentioned is the transfer of technology, skill, and human capital. These are the type of things that could promote South-South trade and deeper integration. Thank you.
Thank you. As all of them especially mentioned most of the points I want to make. Thank you, he enlightened my law. Actually, we always complain, but always I would like to blame myself as African. And all operations, unless it is in win-win situation, it won't end long. Therefore, while we negotiate, we have to negotiate properly, especially our government, because they are not negotiating with the private sector, they negotiate with the government. Sometimes the experts may not know the problem of the private sector. But let ourselves as a private sector, as a business community, do our homework. The issue I always mention is we Africans, or all developing countries, we first need to believe in ourselves so that others believe in us. First of all, we have to do our homework. We don't have to expect from someone, but let us say it's possible, and it's possible. Ethiopia is an example. We are sleeping for how many years? Now we wake up like a nightmare. Now we are running, like we are like hyena or a lion is chasing us. We are not stopping. We are running to escape poverty, and also to address all our problems. Africa has great potential. The future is ours, but we need to change. We need a mind shift. Even the president was mentioning yesterday. Unless ourselves try to stand for our rights and do what we have to do, nobody is going to do it for us. Unless we stand up and believe in ourselves that we can, even God cannot help us, I think. But we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in ourselves and move forward. The cooperation is possible. We have to harmonize for regional integration. If I'm only thinking about Ethiopia and do not understand the win-win situation, nothing will happen. Be it China, India, or among ourselves, we need to think positive and also work on win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would have been a perfect note to end on, but I received a request for one final comment from the Chinese embassy.
We have challenges and difficulties in ourselves as Africa. We have difficulties, challenge between ourselves, but opportunities and the common interests far outweigh the challenges and the difficulties. South-South cooperation, South-South trade will help overcome such difficulties and challenges.
Great, thank you. Now we're officially running over time, but we're actually within our time limit because we started 20 minutes late. By way of a summary, how can one possibly sum up such a huge topic? This is obviously a vast issue, and there are many more layers of complexity that we cannot possibly go into in a 90-minute discussion. However, I think it's worth remembering just how much has changed in the last 10 to 15 years. 10 years ago, a discussion like this would have been unthinkable, because a lot of the trends we're talking about now simply weren't in existence. And when we consider just how much has happened since the turn of the century, it is difficult not to see the potential and not to be optimistic about the future of South-South trade. And despite of all the challenges that have been discussed today, it's going to be very fascinating to see how this plays out in the 21st century. And already we're starting to see the opportunities, and we're starting to see countries like Ethiopia harness those opportunities. The only thing left for me to say is that we're now breaking for coffee, and there's a coffee cupping demonstration at the ballroom. Everybody's invited, And the aspiration is to start the next session at 10:30. So please do come back into the ballroom as soon as possible. And last but not least, please join me in sincerely thanking all of our panelists